The moment I saw my little daughter smiling in the back seat, I made myself a promise. No matter what happened that morning, I would never let anyone take her away from me. Looking back now, I realize I had no idea how close we were to losing everything before we finally found our freedom. My name is Emily Carter. I was 29 years old, working as a legal assistant while raising my 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, on my own. Most people assumed my greatest struggle had been my ex-husband walking out years earlier, but they were wrong. He had disappeared from our lives without a fight. The real battle came from the people who were supposed to love us the most. My own family had become the greatest danger we faced. That Tuesday morning was supposed to change our lives forever. I glanced at the dashboard clock and felt my heart pounding harder with every passing minute. We had less than 45 minutes to reach the courthouse. If everything went as planned, the judge would reject the legal petition my parents had secretly filed against me, and Sophie and I would finally move into the small apartment I had spent months saving for. It was nothing fancy, but to us it represented something priceless: peace. Sophie sat quietly behind me, hugging her old stuffed bunny. She kept humming a little tune she had learned in school while staring out the window. She believed we were simply driving somewhere important. She had no idea that a single decision inside that courtroom would determine whether she came home with me or with my parents. Watching her innocent smile gave me the strength to keep driving even though fear had been living inside me for months. Everything had started almost a year earlier after I told my parents I was moving out. They insisted that no single mother could possibly raise a child alone. Every conversation became another lecture about how I was selfish, irresponsible, and incapable of making adult decisions. At first I thought they were simply struggling to let go. Then the criticism slowly became control. They questioned every dollar I spent, demanded access to my bank account, and even tried deciding where Sophie should attend school. The more independent I became, the more determined they were to pull me back under their roof. When I refused to give in, they stopped pretending their intentions were loving. Without telling me, they hired an attorney and filed paperwork asking the court to give them shared guardianship of my daughter. They claimed I was emotionally unstable and unable to provide a safe home. Reading those accusations felt like being punched in the chest. Every sentence described a person I did not recognize. It was as if they had invented an entirely different version of me just to convince a judge that I did not deserve my own child. Instead of falling apart, I spent months preparing for the hearing. Every paycheck went toward legal fees instead of furniture for our new apartment. Every evening after work I gathered school reports, medical records, financial statements, and letters from teachers who knew Sophie was healthy and thriving. Every document was carefully organized inside a thick blue folder resting on the passenger seat beside me. That folder held nearly everything I had worked for during the hardest year of my life. The night before the hearing still haunted me. My mother knocked softly on my bedroom door wearing the same gentle smile she used whenever she wanted something. She sat beside me and calmly explained that everything could still be fixed if I abandoned the court case and agreed to stay with them. She promised they would forget everything that had happened. I looked into her eyes and realized she was not offering peace. She was offering another prison with prettier walls. When I quietly refused, her smile disappeared, and she walked away after saying I would regret choosing strangers over family. The next morning felt strangely normal. My father read the newspaper without saying much. My younger brother barely looked up from his phone while eating breakfast. My mother even made pancakes for Sophie, laughing and acting as though nothing unusual was happening. The silence felt heavier than any argument we had ever had. Something deep inside me whispered that this calm was not real, but I ignored it because I was focused on getting to court. About 15 minutes after leaving the house, I approached a busy intersection where the traffic lights suddenly turned red. I pressed the brake pedal expecting the car to slow down. Instead, my foot dropped straight to the floor. There was no resistance, no braking. The vehicle kept moving toward crossing traffic as panic exploded through my body. I pumped the pedal again and again, but nothing happened. In that terrifying instant, I realized this was no ordinary mechanical failure, and if I did not think fast, Sophie and I might never make it to the courthouse at all. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers turned white. Cars were already moving through the intersection, and I knew that if I froze for even a second, Sophie and I could become another tragic headline on the evening news. I jerked the wheel toward an unfinished access road beside the highway, bouncing over loose gravel as the car slammed through a shallow ditch before crashing into a pile of dirt. The engine sputtered and died. For a moment there was complete silence except for my own breathing. Then I heard Sophie's tiny voice asking if we were okay. I looked back at her frightened face, forced a shaky smile, and thanked God that she was still alive. I climbed out of the car with trembling legs and looked underneath the front bumper. A dark puddle of brake fluid spread across the gravel, confirming that something had gone terribly wrong. Before I could gather my thoughts, my phone vibrated with a message from my younger brother. It simply read, "Maybe you should have checked your car before leaving." Seconds later, another message arrived from my mother saying that some people never know when to stop fighting. A cold chill ran through me. Those words felt far too deliberate to be a coincidence. As I stood there trying to decide what to do, a construction pickup pulled into the access road. A middle-aged man wearing a reflective safety vest stepped out and immediately noticed the damaged vehicle. Instead of asking whether I needed a tow truck, he crouched beside the front wheel and carefully examined the underside of the car. His expression became serious within seconds. He quietly explained that the brake hose had not simply burst from age or wear, it had been sliced cleanly with a sharp blade. Hearing those words made my stomach sink because they confirmed the terrifying thought I had been trying to ignore. Someone had wanted us to lose control of that car. The man introduced himself as Daniel, a maintenance supervisor working nearby. He reached for his phone to contact the police, but I glanced at the time and realized the hearing was about to begin. Missing Court could hand my parents exactly what they wanted. I quickly explained everything to Daniel, including the guardianship case, the threatening messages, and my fear that my family would stop at nothing to keep control of Sophie. He listened without interrupting, then nodded with quiet determination. Since he was already driving toward the courthouse for a work inspection, he insisted we ride with him. His calm confidence gave me hope at the exact moment I needed it most. The drive felt endless even though it lasted less than half an hour. My phone kept buzzing with new messages, including photos showing our packed belongings scattered across the front lawn of my parents' house. Toys, family albums, and boxes filled with our clothes were lying in the wet grass as if our lives meant nothing. Sophie noticed one of the pictures before I turned the phone over and softly asked why Grandma had thrown her teddy bear outside. I could not answer because I knew if I opened my mouth I would start crying. Daniel simply pressed harder on the accelerator and kept driving. When the courthouse finally appeared, my heart dropped once again. My parents were already standing outside with polished smiles that looked more like victory than confidence. Beside them stood 3 strangers carrying folders. I immediately realized they intended to use false witnesses to convince the judge I was an unfit mother. My father walked toward us and calmly said that bringing one helpful stranger would never be enough because they had prepared for everything. His words were meant to frighten me into giving up before we even entered the building, but after surviving what had happened on the road, I refused to turn back. Inside the courtroom, the hearing began exactly as I feared. One witness falsely claimed she had seen me screaming at Sophie in public. Another insisted I regularly left my daughter alone for hours. A third confidently described me as someone who drank while caring for a child. Every accusation was completely fabricated, yet each lie sounded polished and rehearsed. I remained silent, remembering Daniel's advice to let the truth speak for itself. When the judge finally asked why I had arrived late, I knew that answer would decide everything. Instead of defending myself against every false statement, I calmly explained what had happened that morning. I handed my phone to the court officer so the judge could read the threatening messages himself. The room became completely silent as he studied each text. My mother's attorney immediately objected, but before anyone could continue, the courtroom doors opened. Daniel entered alongside a state trooper carrying sealed evidence bags containing the damaged brake line that had been removed from my vehicle. The officer explained that the cut was intentional and consistent with criminal sabotage rather than mechanical failure. The investigation had moved even faster than I expected. Security cameras from a nearby convenience store had captured someone crawling beneath my car before sunrise. When the officer identified my younger brother as the person in the footage, the entire courtroom seemed to stop breathing. His face turned pale, and within moments he admitted he had damaged the brakes because he believed it would scare me into canceling the hearing. He insisted he never intended for anyone to get hurt, but those excuses carried no weight after risking the life of a little girl. The judge listened carefully before asking Sophie one simple question about where she felt safest. Without hesitation, She answered that home was wherever I was. She quietly added that she was always afraid of making noise at her grandparents' house because everyone became angry whenever children acted like children. Her innocent honesty carried more power than hours of legal arguments. No one had coached her. She simply described her life exactly as she had experienced it. After several long moments of silence, the judge denied the guardianship petition and ordered all evidence from the hearing forwarded to law enforcement for further investigation. He reminded my parents that sharing blood with someone did not grant permission to control or endanger them. Those words lifted a weight I had carried for years. Walking out of the courthouse with Sophie beside me felt like taking my first real breath in a very long time. A few months later, we settled into a modest townhouse in a quiet community where no one knew our past. The walls were plain, the backyard was small, and the kitchen barely had enough room for the two of us to bake cookies together on weekends, but it was ours. Every laugh that echoed through those rooms reminded me that freedom is not measured by the size of a house, but by the peace inside it. Looking back now, I do not define our story by betrayal or fear. I remember it as the day I finally chose my daughter's future over my family's control. And that single choice gave both of us the chance to begin again.